Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Detailed prologue. My grandson threw me into the lake laughing. I was drowning, he was saying, "Don't play the victim." The water was icy cold, like a sharp blade sinking into my bones. I didn't immediately understand what was happening. One moment I was watching my grandson laugh, his face illuminated by the golden light of the setting sun, and the next moment I was falling into the terrifying silence of the lake. The water closed over me with a dull thud. My arms flailed, searching for a grip, support, an outstretched hand. But there was only Nathan's laughter above me. A laugh I had once found so innocent, so joyful, now it sounded like a condemnation. "Don't play the victim, Granny," he had shouted mockingly, as if my panic was just a stage act. The sky was clouding over me. My lungs were burning. I thought about everything I had done for him, the sleepless nights when he was sick, the meals lovingly prepared, the bedside stories. I had believed that a grandmother's love could protect you from anything, even the cruelty of the world. But I was wrong. In the distance, I could hear voices. Footsteps. Muffled cries. Then nothing more. I felt my dress grow heavy, my legs stiffen. And in that damp silence, my thoughts became muddled. Only one image remained clear, that of my grandson's face, standing on the pontoon, his smile full of contempt. It was at that moment that I understood that it was not an accident. When my eyes closed, a strange calm enveloped me. Not peace, no, but the chilling certainty that everything was about to change. Because if I survived, nothing, ever again, would be the same. And this time I'm not the one who will play the victim. The wind blew gently through the branches of the large willow tree by the lake, the one where I had taught Nathan to fish when he was only 8 years old. At that time, he laughed all the time. His eyes shone with innocence, and his voice echoed through the garden like a summer echo. I still remember the day he caught his first fish. He jumped for joy, soaked up to his knees, shouting, "Look, Grandma! I got it!" I did not know then that this same lake, a symbol of our most beautiful memories, would one day become the witness to my greatest pain. I raised Nathan almost alone. His mother, Laura, worked in New York, and his father had left home before he turned 3. So, I took care of everything: breakfasts, homework, nightmares at night. I often thought he was my last reason for getting up each morning. My husband, Andre, had been dead for a long time, and the silence of the house weighed heavily on me. But with Nathan, there was always noise, laughter, life. He was my sunshine. Until the day he started to change. It all started slowly, almost imperceptibly. Around the age of 15, he started to answer me coldly, rolling his eyes when I spoke to him. I attributed it to adolescence, that period when children test limits, rebel, and believe themselves to be invincible. But the words became harsher. Then the silences. And soon, contempt. He came home late, no longer kissed me, no longer said goodnight. One evening, I asked him if he wanted me to prepare his favorite dish, beef stew. He looked at me with a disdain that pierced me to the core. "Grandma, you always think your food will fix everything. But that's not how it works." Those words hurt me, more than I wanted to admit. I didn't reply. I just put the plates away, slowly, in silence. One morning, I overheard a conversation between him and his friends, right in front of the house. He laughed, talking about me as a frail, useless old woman, still rambling on about her memories of the good old days. They were all laughing, and he was laughing louder than the others. I felt a tear fall, not of sadness, but of shame. Shame for having given so much, for having believed that my love would be enough. From that day on, I understood that something inside him had shut down. Something hard, something cold. And then, that Saturday, he suggested we go back to the lake. Her voice was soft, almost like before. He told me, "Come on, Grandma, it's been a long time since we spent time together." I thought it was a sign. An outstretched hand, a chance to rediscover our connection. I put on my blue dress, the one he loved when he was little, and we left together, like in the old days. I didn't yet know that he was taking me there not to reconnect, but to break the bond between us forever. The sun was high in the sky, and the surface of the lake shimmered gently, like a crumpled sheet of silver. It was a peaceful afternoon, almost too peaceful. Nathan walked beside me, his hands in his pockets, his gaze lost in the distance. He hadn't said much since we left. I tried to fill the silence with simple words, memories, tender gestures. Do you remember, Nathan? This is where you learned to swim. You were afraid of the water at first. Yeah, he mumbled without looking up. And your grandfather, he always made you tuna sandwiches, remember? Grandma, that's enough, we're not here to talk about the past. Her voice was dry, almost irritated. I felt my heart clench, but I said nothing. I continued walking, my eyes fixed on the reflections in the lake. When we arrived near the old pontoon, a shiver ran through me. The wood creaked under our feet, as if protesting against the weight of memories. Nathan sat on the edge, his legs dangling over the water, and took out a can of soda. Do you want some? He offered me in a light tone. I refused with a gesture, a gentle smile on my lips. I still believed in the goodness of that moment. But there was something else in his eyes. A glimmer I had never seen before. A mixture of impatience and anger. Tell me, Grandma, do you think you were a good mother? The question took me by surprise. A good mother? But, you mean grandmother? No, mother. For mother. I froze. Laura and I hadn't really spoken in years. Since she left home, she rarely wrote to me. I knew she held some grudges against me, but I never imagined Nathan would defend her like this, with such harshness. I did what I could, I said softly. Yeah. That's always what those who destroy others say. Nathan. She told me things, you know. Things about you. His voice was trembling. He stared at the surface of the lake without looking at me. I felt a dull fear creeping over me. What things? That you were harsh. Cold. That you ruined his youth. That you wanted to control everything. And that even now, you want to control everything. His words were like arrows. I wanted to tell him that I had made sacrifices, that I had loved his mother more than my own life, but the words remained stuck in my throat. He turned towards me suddenly, his gaze dark. And now, you want to do the same with me? Nathan, that's not true, I love you, you know that. Stop. Always the same old song. You love it, you love it. But you destroy everything you touch. He stood up, trembling. I had never seen him like this. I approached, wanting to take his hand. Nathan, look at me. I don't want to argue, I just want. A sharp blow. He pushed me away violently. My foot slipped on the wet plank of the pontoon. The world has changed. And the water swallowed me up. I struggled, suffocating, searching for the light. Above, Nathan's silhouette stood out against the sun. He was laughing. Yes, he was laughing. Don't play the victim, Granny. His words echoed through the water, distorted but cruel, like a sentence. And as my lungs emptied, a certainty struck me. This boy whom I had loved like my own flesh and blood, now saw me as nothing but an obstacle. Everything had become blurry. The water enveloped me like a cold sheet, pulling my body towards the bottom. I felt the mud beneath my fingers, heavy and slimy, gently sucking me in. The world above me already seemed to belong to another life. I wanted to breathe, but my lungs were screaming. I could still see the sun, like a golden circle, far, so far away, and Nathan's silhouette looking at me without moving. I couldn't hear anything anymore. Just a deafening, stifling silence. A silence where my memories paraded by, the first time he had said, Grandma, the day I had accompanied him to school, his little fingers tightly clasped around mine. Then his laughter today, cruel, distorted, which resonated in my head like an echo of betrayal. I felt my strength leaving me. And it was there, in that liquid twilight, that I understood that if I wanted to live, I had to fight alone. No one would come to save me. I don't know how I found the strength. Perhaps by instinct, or perhaps because anger had suddenly given me a breath of fresh air. I splashed in the water, beat my arms, pulled at my heavy dress to tear it. My knee hit a stone, the pain brought me back to reality. And I climbed back up, centimeter by centimeter, towards the light. When my head broke the surface, I coughed, screamed, breathed. The air burned my throat, but it was the most beautiful burn in the world. Nathan, however, was no longer on the pontoon. I looked for him, nothing. Only the wind, and the leaves trembling in the silence. As if none of this had ever existed. I came out of the lake shivering. My clothes were dripping, my hair was sticking to my skin. I was cold, very cold, but my mind was clearer than ever. Every step on dry land was a victory. Each breath, a promise. I sat down on a stone, staring at the still water that had almost killed me. And for the first time in years, I didn't cry. I had no more tears, only a decision taking shape, clear and implacable. I was no longer going to be his victim. That same evening, I went home. No one was there. The house still smelled of wax and memories. On the table was an envelope. A simple sheet of paper, hastily scribbled on. That was his handwriting. Don't tell Mom. She wouldn't understand. Besides, you took everything from me too. I stood frozen, reading those words over and over again. And suddenly, I knew that this gesture wasn't just anger. It was revenge. A revenge passed down, fueled by old grudges that I had never been able to heal. But this time, I was the one who was going to act. Not for revenge, no. But for reveal the truth, the one his mother had hidden from him, the one who had poisoned him against me. The next morning, I called someone I hadn't contacted for years, Claire Beaumont, my childhood friend, who became a psychologist and family mediator. When she heard my trembling voice, she knew something serious had happened. Elise? My God, what happened to you? He tried to kill me, Claire. My grandson. A heavy silence. Then she whispered. Then you have to tell me everything. From the beginning. And that's where my fight really began. Claire welcomed me to her home the next morning, in her office in the heart of the small town. The place smelled of lavender and old paper. The walls were lined with books, and on the desk, a cup of coffee was still steaming. I sat down, trembling, my fingers twisting the handkerchief I had kept since the day before. Claire looked at me gently, but in her eyes, I could already see the worry. Elise, are you sure about what you're saying? Nathan, your grandson? Yes, Claire. He pushed me. He laughed. And he told me not to play the victim. She took a deep breath, then leaned towards me. So, we need to understand why. Because hatred, especially within a family, doesn't arise on its own. I knew she was right. And for the first time, I reopened the door to the past. Laura, my daughter, was born on a winter night. I was young, perhaps too young. His father, André, dreamed of a stable life, but the war had broken him. He drank often, and his words became violent. I wanted to protect Laura from all of this. So I became strict, demanding, sometimes harsh. I thought discipline would be his lifeline. But she saw only severity, not love. When André died, Laura was 17 years old. She looked at me on the day of the funeral and said, "You see, even him, you managed to kill him by controlling everything." These words have stayed with me all my life. And even though she went to live in New York shortly afterwards, the wound remained between us, silent but deep. Claire listened without interrupting me. Her fingers tapped gently on the notebook placed in front of her. And how did things start to deteriorate with Nathan? At first, everything was fine, I said in a low voice. He often came during the holidays. We made cakes, did puzzles, he called me my light. But in adolescence, everything changed. He looked at me with contempt, as if he saw a monster in me. I handed her the envelope he had left on my table. Claire read it slowly, then nodded. You took everything from her too. She repeated the phrase aloud, as if she were weighing its weight. Elise, do you think Laura told him about your past? Yes. But she only told him part of it. Which? I looked at her, my eyes full of fatigue. The one where I am the guilty one. Not the one where I sacrificed everything to save them. Claire sighed. So, if you want to save Nathan, he needs to hear your truth. Not to justify yourself, but to break the lie he's growing up in. Save Nathan? After what he did to me? Yes, Elise. Because if you do nothing, it will be lost forever. His words resonated with me. Saving Nathan. It was strange, after what he had done. But despite everything, he was still my grandson. And deep down, I knew he wasn't entirely responsible for the hatred he harbored. So I decided to confront the past. Not just for him, but for me. So that the truth would not remain buried at the bottom of the same lake where I almost died. 2 days later, I took the train to New York. Laura lived in a modern apartment, high above the noisy streets. When she opened the door and saw me on the threshold, her face froze. Mom? But, what are you doing here? We need to talk, Laura. About Nathan. And about us. His gaze wavered, between fear and anger. What did you do to him? It wasn't me, Laura. It was him. He tried to kill me. She paled, taking a step back. And at that moment, I saw the truth in her eyes. She already knew. The silence in the apartment was heavy, almost suffocating. Laura stared at me, motionless, her lips slightly parted. Her eyes, a deep brown like her son's, trembled between fear and anger. For a moment, I thought she was going to kiss me, invite me in. But instead, she whispered in a broken voice. That's not possible. He would never have done that. I stood straight, drenched by the cold of the truth I carried to her home. He did it, Laura. And if you had seen his look, you would have understood that it wasn't an accident. She looked away, then slumped onto the sofa. Her hands clutched a cushion as if she were afraid of collapsing. Mom, you don't understand. You don't know what you've done to me. His words hit me like a stone. I wanted to speak, but she continued, in a trembling, almost childlike voice. I grew up in your fear, in your control. You decided everything, even my dreams. You said it was for my own good, but you stole my freedom. I swore I would never let my son live in your shadow. I listened to him, my heart heavy, but there was something else in his eyes. A deeper, older pain. And yet, I said softly, it was I who raised him while you were in New York. I who treated his fevers, I who taught him to read, to believe in himself. Yes, because I couldn't come back, she cried. Because I was afraid of you. A long silence ensued. Then, in a lower voice, she added. When he was 10 years old, I told him why I didn't want him to stay with you for too long. I told him that you had locked me up when I was a teenager, the night I wanted to go out with my friends. It was to protect you, I replied, shocked. You were 15, it was raining, and your father had just. No, Mom, she cried. What you call protecting, I experienced as a prison. She stood up abruptly, her eyes filled with tears. Nathan grew up with this story. I told him you were harsh, but I didn't want him to hate you. And then one day, he told me he understood. That he wanted to free me from your control. His words chilled me to the bone. Release. This word, spoken as a justification. So that was it. In his mind, pushing me into that lake was like erasing the past, breaking an invisible chain. I sat down slowly. So it all stems from there. From this misunderstanding, from this wound that we allowed to grow between us. This is not a misunderstanding, Mom. It is a lifetime of silence and fear. I remained silent for a long time, looking at my daughter as one looks at a cracked mirror. And then I whispered. If you think I did all this out of cruelty, you're wrong. Everything I did to protect you. Your father wasn't the man you think he was. She suddenly raised her head. What do you mean? I could feel my hands trembling. It was a secret I had never dared to tell, not even to myself. The night you wanted to go out, your father was drunk. He slapped you, do you remember? Yes, I thought it was you who did it. No, Laura. It was him. And I took the blame to protect you. Because I didn't want you to hate your father. She put her hand to her mouth, stunned. Her eyes changed, suddenly filled with a mixture of shock and guilt. You kept that from me? Yes. And I should have spoken up. Because that silence destroyed everything, your love, your son, and almost my life. Laura broke down in tears. I let her cry, without a word. Because for the first time in years, she was the one crying, and I was the one remaining silent. When she finally looked up, her gaze was no longer the same. We have to find Nathan, Mom. Yes, I replied. Not to punish him, but to tell him the truth before it's too late. A few days later, we learned that he had left town. A message, sent to his mother. I did something irreparable. But I wanted to set you free. Forgive me. Laura burst into tears, and I took her in my arms. This time, there were no more reproaches, no more barriers. Just two broken women trying to save what was left of their family. And as the snow began to fall outside, I looked out the window and whispered. Nathan, my child, you wanted to free your mother, but it is you who have locked yourself in hatred. And I, your grandmother, will not die until I have taught you what love truly is. The snow fell silently on the sidewalks of New York. The streetlights cast a pale light, and the city seemed suspended between two worlds, that of the past, and that which still needed saving. Laura walked beside me, clutching the phone in her hand on which she kept rereading her son's latest message. She didn't speak. Her eyes were swollen with tears, but her step remained determined. Where do you think he went? I whispered. I don't know, she replied. Maybe to the lake. That's always where he went when he wanted to think. I didn't say anything, but my heart sank. The same lake. The one that had almost become my tomb. We contacted the police, reported her disappearance, but everything seemed to evaporate in the icy air. No trace, no witnesses. Nathan had disappeared like a shadow. For 3 days, Laura and I crisscrossed the city. The cafes he frequented, his school, the gym, even the youth shelter he had visited a few weeks earlier. Everywhere, the same answer, no, sorry, we didn't see it. Every evening, we came home exhausted, our hearts a little heavier. I felt Laura slipping into an abyss of guilt. So one evening, as she was crying silently, I said to her, You shouldn't blame yourself. How could I not do it, Mom? If I had told him the truth sooner, if I hadn't made you carry my fears. Laura, hate is contagious, but so is love. We just have to show it to her before it's too late. On the 4th day, in the early afternoon, Laura's phone vibrated. An unknown message. He is here. Just these 3 words, followed by an address, Lakewood, the village where it all began. My blood ran cold. Without thinking, we got in the car. The road was long, and the sky was a leaden gray. I felt the fear growing as we approached the lake. The same wind was blowing, the same trees were bending over the water. And there, at the end of the old pontoon, stood Nathan. He was wearing the same jacket he had worn on the day of the tragedy. His hands were in his pockets, and his gaze was fixed on the water. When he turned around, he first saw his mother. Mom. His voice was trembling. Then he saw me, and took a step back, as if he were seeing a ghost. No, that's not possible. I'm here, Nathan, I said calmly. And alive. He collapsed onto the wood, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Laura ran towards him, but he raised his hand. Don't come near me. I almost killed her. I wanted to free you, but I destroyed everything. I moved forward slowly. The water reflected our faces, 3 generations bound together by pain. Nathan, I said gently, you wanted to fix something you didn't yet understand. But hatred never erases pain. It multiplies it. He looked at me, his eyes red. Mom told me the truth, about Grandpa, about you. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because I was ashamed, my boy. I thought that by keeping quiet about the pain, I would protect you. But silence becomes a poison when it lasts too long. Nathan stood up slowly. He was trembling. I was so scared, Grandma. Scared of becoming like you, and like her. A prisoner of anger. Then break it, this anger, I murmured. Don't carry it anymore. Leave it here, in this lake. He looked at the water, then closed his eyes. And, with a slow gesture, he took a small stone out of his pocket and threw it into the lake. For you, grandfather. And for everything I don't yet understand. The silence returned, but this time it was no longer heavy. He was gentle. Peaceful. Laura approached and took her son's hand. I simply watched them, the 2 of them, hand in hand, in front of the same lake that had almost separated us forever. The wind blew through my hair, and I closed my eyes. I felt that something was finally leaving, the fear, the shame, the weight of the past. That night, Nathan stayed home to sleep. He asked me timidly. Grandma, will you tell me your story? The whole story, this time? I smiled. Yes, my dear. All of it. But not tonight. Tonight, we're simply going to remember that we're still together. And in the peaceful silence of the night, I understood that reconciliation does not erase wounds, it transforms them into lessons. And that even on the verge of drowning, love remains the only breath that brings us back to life. The sun was slowly setting over the lake, tinting the water with golden reflections. It was the same lake. The same place where it had almost all ended. But this time, I wasn't alone. Nathan was standing a few meters away from me, his hands deep in his jacket pockets. He was looking at the water, carefully avoiding my gaze. Beside him, Laura watched the scene in silence, her eyes filled with tears that she didn't want to let fall. I breathed deeply. The wind caressed my gray hair, and each breath brought back memories, my little boy's laughter, the smell of the cakes we baked together, the drawings he made for me for Grandmother's Day. How could such pure love have turned into hatred? I approached slowly, stopping a few steps away from him. Nathan, do you know why I asked you to come here? He shrugged, without a word. Because this is where it all began, and this is where I want it to end. He raised his head. His eyes were hard, full of mistrust, but there was something else behind them, a crack, a fear. You want me to apologize, is that it? He whispered. No, I replied softly. I want you to listen to me. Just once. He clenched his jaw, then nodded his head slowly. I walked to the edge of the pontoon, to the place where his hands had once pushed me. Your mother told you that I made her suffer. That's true. But not in the way you think. She said you hated her. That you wanted to control everything, that she couldn't do anything without you. She was confusing fear with control, Nathan. I didn't want to dominate her, I wanted to save her. I turned to him, my voice trembling. Your grandfather wasn't the man she thought he was. He was violent. He drank. And some nights, I stopped, unable to finish. But Nathan understood. His eyes widened. You mean, that he was hurting her? I nodded. Yes. And when I wanted to leave, he threatened me. So I had to be strong. Cold. Authoritarian. To protect her. But she never knew any of that. He lowered his eyes, murmuring. And she grew up hating you, because she thought you were the monster. I felt my throat tighten. Yes, Nathan. And you inherited this hatred. Without even knowing why. He began to tremble. I saw his fists slowly unclench. What I did was unforgivable, he said in a broken voice. Perhaps, I whispered. But forgiveness, Nathan, isn't about forgetting. It's about deciding not to let evil destroy you anymore. He looked up at me, hesitating. And you, could you forgive me? I didn't answer right away. I simply looked at the lake, this place that had almost become my grave. Not today, I finally said. But maybe someday. If you learn to fix what you've broken. Laura then approached, placing a hand on her son's shoulder. Nathan, listen to your grandmother. She's right. We were all wrong. Me first. His words floated in the air, fragile but true. And for the first time in years, I felt a little light in our darkness. Nathan clumsily wiped away a tear. Then he took a step towards me. I didn't move. And when he opened his arms, I hesitated for a second before giving them back to him. It was not forgiveness. It was a beginning. That night, I stayed by the lake, alone. The silence was profound, almost soothing. I knew that nothing would ever be the same again, but one thing was certain. I was no longer a victim. I was alive. And I had chosen to no longer remain silent. 6 months have passed since that evening by the lake. Winter has given way to spring, and Elisa's house, long silent, is once again filled with voices and timid laughter. The wind blowing through the curtains smells of lavender and warm bread. The same lake, once a witness to hatred, now reflects the peace that has been restored. That morning, Elise was in her garden. The roses she had thought were lost had bloomed again, as if the earth itself wanted to tell her that all was not lost. She heard the door open behind her, then hesitant footsteps. Grandmother? She turned around. Nathan was standing there, a bag of flour in his hands, an awkward smile on his lips. I thought you could teach me how to make your lemon cake again. Elise stared at him for a moment, moved. Then she wiped her hands on her apron and replied simply. Of course, my boy. Come. In the kitchen, the morning light settled on the utensils like a rediscovered old memory. Nathan measured the sugar silently, focused, while Elise beat the eggs. Their movements gradually became synchronized, like a dance learned anew. You know, said Nathan, pouring the batter, I'm going to start studying psychology. Oh really? And why is that? Because I want to understand. To understand what gives rise to anger, fear, shame. And perhaps help others not to be prisoners of them like me. Elise stopped, the whip suspended in the air. Then, slowly, she placed her hand on her grandson's. So you've already started repairing it, Nathan. In the afternoon, Laura arrived. She carried a basket of fruit, the same sweet smile she had in her childhood, but with wrinkles of fatigue and regret around her eyes. Hello, Mom. Hello, my daughter, Elise replied calmly. Laura entered, observed the set table, the cooling cake, and murmured. I never thought I'd see all this again, one day. Me neither, said Elise, but some wounds, when you look at them head on, eventually heal. Laura nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She approached, hesitated, then took her mother in her arms. This gesture, which they had not shared for 20 years, shattered years of silence and resentment. When the sun set, the three of them sat down by the lake. Nathan threw pebbles into the water, Laura laughed softly, and Elise watched the circles widen on the surface. Each wave, she thought, carried away a little of the past, a little of the pain. Grandma, Nathan asked, looking at her, do you think we can really start over from scratch? No, my boy, she replied. You never start from scratch. She placed a hand on her heart. We continue, but differently. With a little more truth, and a lot more love. The evening wind rose, light and cool. And Elise knew, looking at the water, that the lake was no longer a place of fear. It was a mirror. A reflection of his survival, his forgiveness, and the peace he regained.